as you know, with wind and solar, the renewables cost coming down, the battery costs are coming down. You think that's enough, or do you think we need more?
That is so disappointing. I mean, really. Václav yesterday, he said, okay, here's Tokyo, 27 million people. You have 3 days of a cyclone, basically every year. It's 22 gigawatts rate over 3 days. You know, tell me what battery solution is going to sit there and provide that power. I mean, let's not joke around. You're multiple orders of magnitude, you know, $100 per kilowatt hour. That's nothing. That doesn't solve the reliability problem. And remember, electricity is 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. Whenever we came up with this term clean energy, I think it screwed up people's minds because now they don't understand. I was at this conference in New York, I won't name it, and they were saying, all these financial guys got on stage and said, oh, we're gonna rate companies in terms of their CO2 output. And we're gonna say this company puts out a lot of CO2 and financial markets are magical and all of a sudden the CO2 will stop being emitted. And I was like, okay, how are you gonna make steel? Do you guys on Wall Street, do you have something in your desks that makes steel? What? Where's the fertilizer, cement, plastic? Where's it going to come from? You know, do planes fly through the sky because of some number you put on a spreadsheet? So the madness of this so-called finance is the solution. I just don't get that. There is no substitute for how the industrial economy runs today. And, you know, the paradigmatic country is India. Will India pay a premium price to have materials to build buildings, to get rid of slums? Will they pay a premium price for air conditioning? Basically, the answer is no. The voters there won't, and they probably shouldn't, deny themselves when their greenhouse gas emissions per person is only a 20th of what the US has already emitted. And so, you know, who should go first and get emissions per person down to make up for what done past? Of course that should be us. So there's not even an argument in justice that says that price premium ways of doing all the things, not just electricity, that happens. So the idea that we have the current tools and it's just because these utility people are evil people and if we would just beat on them and, you know, put it on our rooftop, that's more of a block than climate denial. The climate is easy to solve group is our biggest problem.
So what are the breakthroughs do you think we need in terms of technology?
Well, it's pretty straightforward that in the electricity sector, you either need something like nuclear fission or fusion that runs 24 hours with the high duty cycle, or if you're going to rely on intermittent sources, then you need some monster miracle that's more than order of magnitude away from anything. This is grid storage, not consumer vehicles going 300 miles.
Right.
This is, you know, hey, Tokyo, don't worry about it. It was cheap to solve. And by the way, you're only getting value out of that battery once a year. So, you know, do the math on what that looks like per kilowatt hour. Anyway, so you have electricity generation. You have the industrial economy, so you have to figure out how to make all those things. A lot of the things, if you can make cheap hydrogen, that actually solves several of those things in terms of the chemistry type side of that. But steel and cement are kind of special and require particular solutions. You have transport problems other than cars, which the energy intensity is far more difficult. And the 24% of the emissions are agriculture and meat related emissions. And those are very difficult. There, you know, I fund things like Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat, a variety of companies to try and completely change how products that the acid test is can you tell it's artificial meat or not? If you can tell, we're in big trouble. So the goal is sometime in the next 5 years to have that product, at least in the ground beef category, be such that you cannot tell the difference. And that's pretty big. I mean, cows, if they were a country, they would be in the top 5 emitters in the world, and that's just cows. And people, believe me, they've tried to feed them different things or put a little torch on their butt or things. It doesn't work.
But it's also the deforestation that is caused by grazing and things like that.
That's right. But the beef, if you get to a certain GDP per person, actually, you have reforestation. So Massachusetts today is more forested than it's been in the last 60 years. But in general, you do get deforestation. So if you take Indonesia and Brazil, their biggest category of emissions by far is the land use piece. If you take Australia and New Zealand, it's the cows that are there that are the biggest. So you need innovation in a surprising number of sectors of the economy. And unfortunately, the goal is 0. Actually, the way they do the models now, because they're trying to make it look like 1.5 degrees isn't the biggest joke ever, they show these gigantic negative emissions. And I'm the biggest funder of various carbon capture things, liquid, solid, you name it. But the likelihood of that being economic, that is more than 2 orders of magnitude non-economic right at the moment. And as Václav reminds us, it would have to be 10 times the size of the oil industry. That is the amount of stuff that you would have to stick underground. It's just 10 times the entire oil industry.
So let's talk about the agricultural side, because I think that's really important. I'm a product of the Green Revolution, which was this short strain of wheat. I would not be here if it was not for that. Do you think, given the tools that we have in biology today, of CRISPR-Cas9 and all the gene editing, do you think there's another green revolution we should have, not just for food, but for carbon as well, and maybe a combination of the two at one shot? Do you think that's possible?
Well, yeah, the Gates Foundation funds a thing called improving photosynthetic efficiency. And there is literally a factor of 2 to be had in terms of changing the basic photosynthetic pathway. There's about 4 different things you have to do. But the photosynthetic pathway is not optimized. That is, there was an evolutionary bottleneck when CO2 levels were very low, and these plants don't have the right rubisco and the right, they turn off, they don't like to die. And so they're not maximizers in terms of their output. And so there's various ways that you can change photosynthesis. That would be extremely valuable, not just in the plant economy, but also as you move that over into trees that are extremely good. They sequester carbon extremely well. That's a large standing stock of carbon, although it's a one-time gain unless you do some put it down below the ground. Eventually it'll rot and recycle back in. So yes, and I think it's like improving photosynthetic efficiency, not funded. What could be cooler than improving photosynthetic efficiency? So yes, we need a new green revolution. Agricultural productivity in Africa is a quarter of what it is in the US and Europe. It's partly you don't have extension service, you don't have fertilizer, you don't have irrigation, but it's also that the seeds are not well adapted to the various environmental conditions. And Africa has more variety than any other continent. So the variety of types of seeds you need is actually a lot greater. It's that whole seed thing is not well invested in. But if you care about climate adaptation, the thing you would most invest in, by far the top of the list, would be more productive seeds. So if you're only having 3 or 4 good years, you either maintain buffer stock or you sell it and you have cash that holds you through that year that your harvest isn't working. Likewise, there's a lot we can do to deal with high temperature and deal with drought. There are crops like sorghum that teach us how you can deal with tough conditions.